Welcome to the Project Management Operating Room, where we look at real project management problems, diagnose them, and offer practical solutions. Today, we're going to talk about three cases. First one I'm calling the Green Resident. This is a case where a new project manager is struggling with a role and how to keep things straight when there's a lot of different dependencies. The second case is what I'm calling dogmatic procedures. This is one where an agile coach slash transformation expert is brought onto a project and they become frustrated when the team starts pushing back on some of the ceremonies that they are trying to implement. The third case is what I'm calling a workflow relapse. This is one where project manager is frustrated that they spent many hours configuring Notion for project management. The team used it for a little while, stopped using it, and the PM isn't sure where to go from here. They think things are too disorganized. So let's get into it. We're going to start with case one, the Green Resident. I'm going to read this one to you. This, as all the cases, is from Reddit. Just past my 6 month managing projects, coming from a more technical role. Honestly, don't get how people keep everything together. I feel like I'm constantly missing something and always one step behind what's actually happening. On paper, it looks simple: tasks, timelines, dependencies. But in reality, it's like everything depends on something else, and half of it isn't even written down somewhere. It's also weird being responsible for delivery, but not really having control over the people doing the work. I'm expected to own the outcome, but I can't force decisions, can't unblock things myself most of the time, and still somehow it all rolls up to me. We have tools, boards, trackers, all of that, but I'm starting to feel like they don't reflect what's actually going on. Things look in progress forever, blockers show up too late, and I find out about issues only when there are already problems. There wasn't much onboarding either, so I've just been trying to piece things together as I go. I spend a lot of time just trying to understand what matters versus what just looks important. I log in and immediately feel overwhelmed. Like I should know what to do next, but I don't always trust that I'm focusing on the right thing. I've handled complex stuff before, but in other roles, but this feels different. Less about doing the work, more about trying to keep everything from drifting apart. Not planning to leave or anything, just trying to figure out how people actually get good at this. Right now, it just feels like I'm reacting to things more than managing them. All right. So, very honest post by this project manager, new project manager, and I give them a lot of credit for being so honest and transparent about this. It's a hard thing to be so honest, and so I give them a lot of credit for that. Let's get into the problem. So, the first one is clearly a frustration with the responsibility without authority model. The second one is the documentation around dependencies is insufficient. As we heard, that's causing a lot of confusion. The third problem is that the tasks are in progress too long and the blockers are showing up too late. And then fourth is the PM is spending a lot of time just trying to make sense of it all and still, struggling to really come up with the answers from that. So how do we, what let's first look at the root cause of these symptoms. So the first one, frustrated by responsibility without authority. And sadly, this is the role. It's a hard role. It really is a challenging model where you're responsible for everything, but you don't have the authority to kind of make the team conform to the way you feel it needs to be. In many cases, it's a model where you have to influence as opposed to going after it from an authoritative standpoint. And so that's really a huge challenge. And 6 months in, this is very understandable that it's a struggle right now. And again, credit for sticking with it, credit for trying to find answers. But this really is a very normal feeling when you're starting out. So I think that's just something that you get used to. It gets better as you go, but you start a new project, you kind of, a lot of these things come up. Even experienced folks, a lot of these things that we're talking about, they still come up. Problem two is the documentation around dependencies is insufficient. So we heard that, hey, the dependencies are written down, but there's other things that depend on certain other things, and they're not written down. So it was a little bit confusing, but I think this was, certainly an issue. And for me, the root cause here is it just feels like there's a lack of process and leadership around documentation. So I don't know if this is something where the dependencies are, in Jira or whatever they're using for project management, or if they are in a document, or why it's so scattered. I mean, it doesn't sound like they're sufficiently documented in whatever PM tool they're using. So, and that comes from, a lack of being forced to do it, really. And there could be other reasons. I won't get too deep, but there are other reasons as well. Just it could be like, hey, whoever is entering the tasks, whether it's this new PM or someone else, they're not properly marking the tasks to show those dependencies, and so they're not showing up very easily. Problem three was the tasks in progress are taking too long and the blockers are showing up late. So why is this happening? For me, I think normally when this happens, it's because the tasks are not being broken down sufficiently. So, in this case, it sounds like if it's taking too long, and it's in progress for a long time, that's usually a symptom of a task that hasn't been broken down enough. Now, again, there are tasks that are significant tasks that we endeavor to finish in a sprint, and they're big, but it doesn't sound like the case here. It sounds like it's fairly consistent. Same thing with the blockers showing late. If you break the work down into smaller units, the blockers are going to show up earlier, and then you can free up those things that otherwise would have been blocked because you have it in smaller chunks. And then lastly, the PM is spending a lot of time trying to understand. And for me, the root cause is I don't think there's a deep understanding of the projects, which is completely and totally understandable in this case. But the ideal place to get to is one where you have a deep understanding of the project, and you can kind of filter out what is and isn't important, and that really takes a lot of time. 6 months is a decent amount of time, but if you're brand new to it, and the person is, it still isn't a ton of time. And really, where you want to be able to get to is the project well enough that you can go through these things and figure out, okay, why is this here, or why is that there? That doesn't need to be there, it needs to move here. That's the ideal place to be, and we're not there right now, and so it's taking a lot of time to try to catch up. And it also sounds like, kind of, we talked about in problem two with the documentation dependencies, it sounds like things are really scattered. So that's also making it really hard, when you don't have a full end-to-end understanding of the project, and the documentation is super super scattered. It's really really hard. So completely understandable problem here. So how do we fix it? So I think the first one is identifying what the problems are with the scattered work, the tools, documentation, and work collaboratively with everyone involved to solve it. So it sounds like the team is kind of doing things the way they've done them, but we need to, and I think the thing to keep in mind here is I don't want to frame this as, oh, well, this is a new project manager, because I don't think it is. I think this is a case where things are being done a certain way and it's confusing. And the reality is, if one person is confused, I can guarantee you multiple people are confused. And I can guarantee you that anyone else who's trying to go through whatever tool they're using or whatever documentation they have and figure it out is probably struggling as well. So to me, it's, kind of working together with the team and management, or product owner, project sponsor, whatever the case might be, and saying, okay, this is what I'm seeing as some challenges. Here's what I'm suggesting or thinking of to fill in the gaps. What do you guys think? And start with the team, get their feedback. They've been there for a while. They can probably help, and just see what resonates with them. So that's how I would start it, and then you take that conversation, you go to management, and you say, hey, this is what we're thinking, this is what we'd like to do, we want you signed off on it. Then you have your buy-in. um, Solution two is trying to get deeper integrated into the project. So seeing if you can get demos, sitting in on if there's like a formal QA session, anything like that would be really helpful to kind of start seeing the end to end. And the other thing that you can work with to get a deeper understanding besides the demos is just asking a ton of questions. And it's really hard when you're new and you feel kind of a little bit self-conscious about looking bad if you're asking an obvious question. But I mean, my experience has been that usually if I have the question, somebody else does too. And sure, the person that is doing the work, that is executing the work, they, might seem like a simple question to them, but sometimes it's hard when you're so deep, as these subject matter experts are, to break down the simple things when you're so deep into the complex things. And I think that's where asking the simple question is helpful. The third thing I would do is really trying to take a leadership role in breaking the work down into smaller slices. So we talked about the documentation a little bit and kind of how I would approach that with a more collaborative approach to doing that. But I think really working with a team to break down the work. So in the sprint planning, and the backlog refinement is really trying to get these tasks into smaller pieces, and that's going to help with the tracking. And that's, and I mentioned that in when we're doing the analysis, is really that's for me the main thing here. But again, credit to this PM working through some early challenges, and I give them a lot of credit for that. All right, let's go into the second case today. So this one is what I'm calling dogmatic procedure. I was recently brought into a company specifically to help lead an agile transformation. I've worked with the hiring manager before at two other organizations, and in both cases, the transformations were successful. In this situation, we're starting to get pushback that the changes aren't working. As a result, someone who isn't very familiar with Agile is now proposing a new team structure and suggesting we eliminate some core Scrum ceremonies. What's making this tricky is that the leader who brought me in knows my track record and experience, but seems to be giving weight to feedback from someone without Agile background over established practices that have worked in prior transformations. I'm curious how others have navigated situations like this when Agile ways of working are being questioned early and decisions are being influenced by stakeholders who don't have direct experience with it. What's worked for you in terms of stabilizing buy in or course correcting environments like this? To further back up my stance, reports show that there has been a 20% increase in productivity in the 6 weeks we've been using Agile. So this one is really interesting for me. Let's get into the problems first. So this person sounds more like an Agile coach than a PM. I'm not sure. So if you're watching on YouTube, the slides use AC instead of PM here. But so the first one is this concern about the team wanting to skip some of these what they call ceremonies. Scrum Guide calls them events. You know, however you want to frame it. The second problem is that the coach feels that the leadership should be backing them up. So we heard about the fact that the team has been bringing forward some concerns, wants to cut some of what they are calling ceremonies, and they feel like the manager should be backing them up and forcing them to do the ceremonies. The third problem is that the Agile coach feels that the non-Agile experts have too much say. So, and I wouldn't call them experts here. These are, well, I guess non-Agile experts is probably fair. And then lastly, the Agile coach believes the same process will work as before. And so this is one where we heard about the fact that, well, it's worked in two other places and this is how it's done. And so it feels like, okay, well, it's worked there, so it should work here. So those are the main symptoms. And I would say the first three are the symptoms that this individual presented in their post, and the fourth one is the one that I'm seeing that is a little bit more inferred. Okay, so what are the root causes of these problems? So the first one is why does the team want to skip the events? Well, I don't think they've seen the benefit of the new ways of working. We heard about this thing where, well, there's a 20% increase in productivity. Well, how are you measuring that? And we heard about, well, the past two transformations were successful. How are you measuring that? And so, for me, it's a really tough, over a 6 week period, it's a really tough metric to back up. And I'm not really sure that's something that is manifesting as far as how the team feels, because they're saying, hey, we want to cut a couple of these meetings. There's too many meetings. And it wasn't in the post. And actually, I found this deeper in the comments because a lot of people were asking that question about, what exactly are they trying to skip? And eventually the person responded and said, well, they want to skip the two of the quote unquote ceremonies because they feel like with this new process they're in meetings too much, which is perfectly valid concern if you're not used to being in all these meetings all the time. So for me, the root cause is just pretty simple. They don't see the benefit. They're feeling overwhelmed by all these new extra meetings. Problem two was that the agile coach feels that leadership should be backing them up. And what is the root cause here? Well, the root cause is that the manager can't just say, okay, I brought in my former colleague who we've worked with twice before, and I trust them, and everybody just has to do it. I mean, they could do that, but generally speaking, especially if this person is like a consultant, you run the risk of alienating the team if you do that. So it's important as a manager to listen to all viewpoints and respect them and hear them. And so a lot of times you have to call it down the middle, or you have to work with parties involved to find compromises as a manager, as you do with the project, as a project manager too. It shouldn't be all or nothing. Problem three is the agile coach feels that these non-agile experts have too much say as far as wanting to change things. And the root cause here is, I think that this individual's mindset is very, very dogmatic, and so they're just not open to alternative ways of doing things. It's just, hey, I've done it this way. It's worked twice. I'm going to do it this way. And that kind of leads into point four, which is that this belief that the same process will work because it's worked before, and that root cause is kind of from this mentality of, well, one size fits all. It's and unfortunately it's not. I'm not trying to criticize this person, because again, credit to them for asking for help, but there is a group of people that believe that within Scrum and within Agile, that, well, and really Scrum is a framework and Agile is a mindset, and that and kind of that in the post itself is a little bit conflating the two terms, which can be confusing for some. But in any event, the thing is that the Scrum guy doesn't call for things to be done in a particular way. And I think that somehow, somewhere along the way, we've gotten to this point where, there's a group of people that believe that, you have to run every single Scrum event the same way, and you can't change it. But what's funny is that the Scrum guide in the very first page of it says that, try this, but adapt it to what works for your team, essentially. And one of their big tenets on that first page is transparency too. So, this project, this case is really exemplifying that challenge, where this belief that one size fits all, we always do it the same way, everybody has to do it the same way, and it just doesn't leave things open to agility. That's the bottom line here. All right, so how do we fix it? They're asking for help, so let's try to offer some. So what I would do is this dogmatic approach that I just alluded to has to be adjusted, right? Is saying that, okay, we have to run these events. They have to be run the same. I need backup. I've run it the same way. That is not agile by any way, shape, or form. It's not even close. It's, for all the talk about, as we villainize waterfall, and waterfall has a lot of downfalls, but I think in this case we are basically taking a waterfall approach to Scrum. Is exactly what we're doing. Is we're this person is coming in as a consultant, as an agile expert, agile coach, and saying, this is how I do it. Everybody has to do it this way, and we're not deviating from my program. There's zero agility in that. So the second thing I would do differently is to approach the team empathetically and understand their concerns and what's not working. So instead of reacting and saying, oh, I can't believe I'm not getting supported by management, and I can't believe that people are pushing back on these things when they don't know anything about Agile, that's not the right mindset. The right mindset is, let me step into their shoes. Let me understand what it's like for them. So these are people, from what I can gather here, and I'll be clear. I actually hesitated in putting this one in the show because my first thought was, I don't know, there's not enough context here. But I actually thought that the context told me a lot, right? And well, the lack of context told me a lot, and it told me a lot in that the person expected that, hey, this is just how it works, right? And so instead, we need to understand exactly where they're coming from. And so as I started to say is we have this situation where they are used to doing things a certain way, and now we're doing things differently. And with all these events, we are scheduling tons and tons of meetings that they're not used to having. So, we have the stand up, we have the sprint planning, we have the sprint review, we have the sprint demo, we have all these different, and the retro, and we have all these things, and these are all taking up time on the calendar. And so they're pushing back and saying, "Oh, this is way too much." And so we need to, this agile coach needs to really get in their shoes and understand where their concern is coming from and adapt to it. Okay, can we cut back on the stand up? Can we go 3 days a week to accommodate the concern? Can we skip this retro if we know what the concerns are and we're waiting for management to address them? We have to be adaptable, and right now that seems to be missing. And then lastly, I think when you're in a position as an agile coach, you have to explain why. And it's not just a matter of saying we're doing it this way and this is why we're doing it. It's we're doing it this way. This is why it's worked in other situations. And do you think it would work here? And that last part is the part that seems to be missing. That is really critical. Is you were brought in by, in this case, this person was brought in by a former colleague who's the manager of the team, who knows that this person, has done a good job for them in the past, that so much that they want to work with them a third time. But at the same time, you know, it's important to also get teams buy-in. That's where all this friction is coming from. The friction is coming from the fact that this person was brought in, they're doing things the same way as they did in two other places, but they didn't get any buy-in from the team. They just said, "Hey, go do this." And so that's where this is all coming from. So got to get some buy-in from the team and explain to them the why and make sure it's working for them. So that is the dogmatic procedure case. Let's get into the third case, which is workflow relapse. I need a suggestion as I recently joined a company in a middle management marketing position and have started managing many projects and campaigns simultaneously. My main struggle is the absolute chaos of how other team members, including my direct manager, operate. Emails, spreadsheets upon spreadsheets, notes, in docs, random mentions on team meetings that never manifest in anything written, but then surface in the form of, quote, "I did say it 10 weeks ago in some random spreadsheet," unquote. Sometimes I struggle for hours trying to compile all of the data into one place. I use Notion for personal project management, and that helps me a lot. I have tried to adopt Notion team wide, and our CMO agreed with all my points. After hours and hours of setting up Notion and workflows for the wider team, making it as simple as possible, and having one on one calls with each team member, showing the workflows and how it can benefit them, setting up workflows that mimic their own, 6 months later, the wider team got back again to using spreadsheets, emails, random messages, and turned everything into chaos, essentially abandoning all my effort. I feel sad and pissed, and I have never seen this in my previous career experience, an absolute refusal to learn something new and better. How do you act in a situation like this? Perhaps a tip you can share where you try to organize chaos, but they simply refuse or tell you to your face, quote, "Yeah, this is great. I will use it," end quote, and then just use it once and just abandon it. All right, so this is a really interesting one. So let's take a look at these problems. So the first one that the PM initially set out to solve was that the team's documentation is scattered. Then we heard about that they implemented Notion and it wasn't adopted. And now the last part was we heard about the fact that the PM feels that the team is quote unquote refusing to learn something new and better. So what are the root causes of these problems? So the documentation is scattered because there's a lack of leadership in mandating that things are being done a certain way and organized a certain way. So we have files in different places. We have messages being dumped into Slack. We have emails being thrown around, and so everything is scattered because it's not there's no leadership. And honestly, this leadership can come from project manager. It can come from a functional manager. So this PM is also someone who can step up and say, "Hey, can we please do it this way? This is what I'm thinking." But based on what has happened after this, I would proceed with that a little bit more carefully and talk to the team first. Um, so that brings us into problem two, which is that Notion was implemented and it wasn't adopted by the team. And why wasn't it adopted? Well, the main thing to me is that the PM did not get the buy-in or consult the team. We heard they went to the chief marketing officer. Chief marketing officer said it was great, but we never heard anything about Notion was evaluated based on the team's workflow, or Notion was evaluated based on the fact that the team tested three tools and liked that one the best. We heard about the fact that the PM likes it, and so they decided, oh, this is amazing, so we're going to go with it for everybody. There's no consultation in that, so you're not going to get the buy-in. It's just a unilateral decision that was made with one executive saying, yeah, this sounds good. The third problem was the PM feels that the team is refusing to learn something new and better. And the root cause here is that the team showed it isn't better. You know, if they tried it out and they went back to using their old systems, they didn't think it was better. They didn't see the benefit of it. So you did one-on-one demos with them. You configured the workflows for them. They used it for 6 months and they said, hey, we don't like it. It's not working for us. So, you know, the reality is that they're not refusing to learn something new and better. Sounds to me like they tried and it wasn't better. All right. So how do we solve it? So the first one for me is running a complete and proper process that includes the team for selecting and implementing a project management tool. So rather than what we just talked about with the PM likes Notion, so we're going to use Notion, you know, get the team involved to at least a reasonable extent and say at least, okay, what are the key features that would help you guys do your work more effectively? And then go back, research it, and say, hey, these are the tools that I have found that meet all of our requirements. I've talked to management. This is the budget that they have for it. This is what they're willing to spend. You know, I've set up a demo account. Please go in, take a look, see what you think. This is what I think. And that's the way of doing it and trying to get that buy-in. And you know, that is sorely lacking here. The second thing I would change is I think the mindset has to be changed from removing personal opinions and focus on serving the team where they are. You know, if a team is used to spreadsheets and emails and all this stuff, and you know you want to change it all at once, that's fine. But again, the personal opinion of, well, Notion worked great for me, so it's going to work great for them, you know, isn't effective, and clearly wasn't. We lost a lot of time and effort. This PM spent a ton of time and effort trying to configure it, and it didn't work for the team. And so instead of kind of working with them to figure out what would serve them the best, it was just this PM and the chief marketing officer's opinion that dictated to the team what they thought should work. And then finally, I think, is working with the team within the new project management software and probably even a little bit outside to create better practices around where documentation is kept and how things are stored. So cutting down on the emails, cutting down on the maybe the more detailed stuff in Slack that could be, and honestly, I'm okay with the Slack stuff, to be honest with you. I think that's a good place for more in-depth conversation. But that's just my opinion. But the kind of the key things that come out of those conversations, they should also go in the new project management tool. So that's how I would approach this one, is really trying to work to define some processes that everybody agrees to and that will make things better for the team. So it could be as simple as like, hey, we have this Google Drive and all the files that we're going to use for our work are going to be in the Google Drive, and we're going to throw links in the project management tool, or just, you know, have that integration set up in the project management tool. So that's a collaborative process that needs to happen. All right, so covered 3 cases today, and you know it's really interesting. It's trying to figure out, you know, kind of what did we learn. So, you know, in the first case, we had a person that was a new project manager. They only been at it for 6 months. They're just feeling like, hey, I'm just completely buried, and everything is falling on my shoulders, and I am feeling completely overwhelmed, and but I don't have any authority to really handle these things that I'm ultimately responsible for. And so we're just reminded of the fact that's the role. That's one of the hardest parts of the role in general. And so what it requires influencing, it requires leadership. And It doesn't have to be leadership. Doesn't something that has to be with, um, having the authority over the person from a management standpoint. It can be something that where you're leading by example. You're leading by the fact that the team knows that you're in it with them and they trust you to help them. That's where we want to be, and that's the most important thing that I took out of that, and I'm reminded of, is that needs to be our approach. And again, I thought that project manager is doing their best, and the sentiments they expressed are very, very, very common and normal. And so, I wish them the best. I think they'll do fine as time goes on. 6 months isn't a lot of time when you're brand new, so yeah, I think it'll come. From the agile coach, for me, the big takeaway in that second case was just the fact that I'm reminded of the fact that we have to be we have to live what we preach. And there's a real contradiction in saying that we're agile, but you have to do things a certain way. And that's just the constant contradiction that comes up is yes, we're agile and we've done these agile transformations, and we're doing scrum and all this, but at the same time we're saying we're not going to listen to people who don't know agile that well, and we're not going to listen to the team when they say that the what this person called ceremonies are taking up too much time, because we have some magic 20% number that we got in 6 weeks. And to me, that is just so unfortunately not agile, and it really flies in the face of everything that is in the manifesto, everything that is in the scrum guide. And I mean, again, there, and as I said when we covered it, is that is a mindset that some folks have. I respect it. Everybody's entitled to their interpretation of it. But for me, I think agile is the mindset that needs to supersede everything here, and that is not happening in that case, right? Okay, so then the one that we just talked about with the notion, and for me, the one I'm reminded about there is just the fact that we have to have buy-in, and getting buy-in from one person, one executive is never enough. We have to get buy-in from the team. We have to include the team. And some would say, oh, well, if I include the team in it, it's going to take too long. Well, if you do it the way I described, where you're keeping them apprised of every step in the process and not requiring a ton of time at them, but making sure that they are heard, that if they say, hey, we really want something that integrates with Google Drive, that's a non-negotiable in every tool that you're looking at, or we really want something that has markdown in it, that has to be front and center. And so they know that you heard everything that they said. So when you come back to them and say, hey, these are the three tools that I think would work well for us, and that all three of them do everything that you guys said to me, then even if they don't put their hands on it, you're going to have some degree of buy-in because they know that you heard them. And that's the thing, is kind of like we talked about in the first case, is the team has to know that you have their back. And in that case, with the notion, we're just trying to force a new process on them without understanding what helps them and what works for them. We know what worked for that PM, but we don't know what worked for the team. So those are my thoughts. Hopefully you learned something as well, but those were the really key reminders for me. I appreciate you watching and listening, and hope you have a great day. Thank you.